We have a pope, and this is a shocker, guys. He is American.
We witnessed history made here late today, the first ever American pope.
Cardinal Robert Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV, the head of the Catholic Church.
The shock. This is groundbreaking in many ways.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
It's a beautiful day in the life of the Catholic Church and in the life of every person on earth.
How did today feel? Overjoyed.
Just wonderful.
Just totally overjoyed. We're floating.
It was just kind of flabbergasting, honestly. I've known him for a little while, a man of great intelligence. A lot of us were saying, myself included, they'll never elect an American pope. Well, they did.
Now, one burning question I have is he a Chicago White Sox fan?
He's the first USA Pope, and that's a great blessing for the United States of America.
We're a little bit surprised, but very happy. It's just a great, absolutely great honor.
Watching, and they said, he's from America. I said, that's great.
As the first North American Pope, Pope Leo XIV's leadership comes at an important time for the Catholic Church and for the world. I will invite His Holiness Pope Leo to Australia.
I think this is a man with a genuinely missionary heart. I am very much looking forward to his coming to Sydney for the International Eucharistic Congress in 2028.
I'm happy, really happy.
Good for the Catholic Church and the country as well, and the world as well, actually. So.
Oh my God, I'm so happy and so special. My heart is so full.
Well, joining us from an exuberant Rome is Vatican correspondent Colin Flynn. Colin, an American Pope. No one saw this coming. What's the reaction been?
Georgie, when I was standing in St. Peter's Square, we saw the white smoke, and then when they came to the balcony and he walked out and they announced who he was, there was an American priest beside me, and I had to help lift his jaw off the ground. Everybody was so shocked because, as you heard Bishop Barron say in that piece, he was in the running, but he was like second tier. In fact, Bishop Barron, who you saw there, he said to me, if any American has a chance, it would be him, because he's actually seen as the least American of all the American cardinals. And I say that because for a third of his life, he was in Latin America. He was a missionary in Peru. So he has that, similar to Francis, pastoral outreach. He knows what it means to be close to people who are suffering. And he's going to bring that into his papacy. And what I thought was really interesting was when he stood on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, the sun setting behind him. It was a beautiful evening in Rome. He made a speech where he hit a lot of the key points of Pope Francis's pontificate. He mentioned the environment. He talked about peace. He talked about migrants. In fact, when he first came out, he said, in the words of the risen Christ, my peace I give you, peace be with all of you. So that really appeals to the more progressive left side, let's say, of the Catholic Church. But look what he was wearing. Because Pope Francis famously said, I'm not going to wear the traditional papal attire. I want something simple and white. But actually, this Pope, Pope Leo XIV, he went back to the more beautiful red traditional papal attire, which was a message and a signal to the more right traditional side of the Catholic Church, saying, look, I'm going to be a Pope for you, for them, for everybody. Let's unify.
So given the shock, though, Colin, what was it that the cardinals saw in Robert that made them want him as their new Pope?
I think, Susie, there were two things, because in the pre-conclave meetings where they would tell us every day, here's what the cardinals spoke about, here are the issues that are going to be the driving forces in this conclave, lots of things came up, like reforming the Vatican finances, continuing to tackle the sexual abuse crisis, evangelizing, trying to get more young people into the churches, whereas here in the West, they're becoming more and more empty. But the main thing was unity. We need someone who's going to bring that ideological divide together in the church. And remember, like I said, he's got that pastoral side from his days in Peru, but he also worked for many years right here in Rome in a very important department within the Vatican. So he proved that he could be a missionary, but also he could be an administrator and get a job done. And you need both of those to run the church.
Colin, talk to me about the significance of the name Leo. What's the meaning behind that?
Yeah, Pope Leo XIV, the last one was Pope Leo XIII, and he was in the late 19th and early 20th century. And he was known as a pope who tried to bring the papacy into the modern times back then. He was also renowned for being a supporter of social justice. He often spoke out against capitalism, and he really championed workers' rights. So it's fascinating that, Cardinal Prevost from Chicago has chose this name to have a papacy in his image, which again would say that we're going to see a papacy that will probably be very much like Pope Francis, championing the underdog, going to the peripheries and, speaking out for those who are in need.
How much do you think the fact that Donald Trump is president of the United States impact the decision to pick an American and not necessarily an American who is an ally of Donald Trump?
You know what, Max? That's a great question, because we thought it was going to work against all of the cardinals, because as you know, famously, Pope Francis had a turbulent relationship with the United States. In fact, he once called out publicly the US Vice President, J.D. Vance, when he used some ancient Catholic theological beliefs to justify their position on their administration policies at the border, the southern border. But then actually, I say that, but who was the last person that Pope Francis met publicly before he passed away? Was J.D. Vance. But we thought that relationship, because it was so fraught between Pope Francis, between the Church and the United States, that would go against the Americans. But like I keep saying, we do not know what happened in the Sistine Chapel. We believe the Holy Spirit was guiding these men. So for some reason, the Holy Spirit up there said it's time for the United States, the first time, to be at the top of the Catholic Church.
Colm, thank you for taking us through it, and thank you for all of your coverage.
My pleasure, and so great to talk to you always, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Colm. Let's cross now to our US correspondent. That's what the word is on everything America, Steve Clemens. Steve, we just heard Colm call Pope Leo the least American cardinal. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a great framing. I mean, while he's the first American pope, he's not an America First pope. And I think that is a really interesting dimension to this. He's a global guy from the south side of Chicago. And I think that, in his life, and at least what we know from his teachings and commentary, he also happens to be a pope that tweets a lot and retweets a lot. And it's a lot about migrants, the poor, the disadvantaged. And so I think it was a good way to frame it.
Well, we know that the new Pope has voted in several Republican primaries, but has also criticised J.D. Vance. We heard that from Colm as well. What is the relationship, Steve, do you think, likely to be with the White House?
Well, I think there's going to be a little bit of a honeymoon, and both Vice President Vance and President Trump have come out and said what a great thing that the Vatican picked an American Pope. So it's positive on that front. But after the honeymoon is over, I think it's going to be a train wreck. I think the Pope has a 1.4 billion followers, very big deal. And he's already called out the vice president and to some degree the president in his tweets. He challenged Vice President Vance in saying, who had written or made comments that first you love your family, then you love others. And now Leo XIV, what we know is Leo XIV, then Robert Prevost had come out and said, no, that's wrong, Vice President Vance. You don't rank your love. Jesus never ranked his love of people. I think it was a very important message. And Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York had written, who's a conservative in the church, had talked about how important it was to embrace migrants, to embrace the disadvantaged who are being moved around by violence and other issues around the world, and how that was core to America's story. And Prevost, now the Pope, tweeted this out because Dolan was challenging President Trump's anti-immigrant stance. So he's a political guy who's been making the case against these political leaders that they need to have a wider aperture in welcoming those that are in trouble.
I mean, President Trump famously doesn't mind people calling him out on social media, does he? What are Trump and his followers making of this appointment?
Well, as I said right now, those in power in the White House are applauding the appointment. Those not in the power, but who are whispering in the ear of President Trump, like Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer is a very big icon of the MAGA right in America. She is known to be someone who went in and told President Trump to fire a number of people in the National Security Council because she didn't feel they were loyal enough, and he did that. And she has tweeted out that this Pope is a Marxist, he's anti-Trump, he's anti-MAGA, and they're basically setting themselves up to be quite hostile to this Pope.
Well, Father Peter Jones is the Prior Provincial of the Order of St Augustine for Australia. Father, because you're both Augustinians, was he your number one pick?
We try not to be tribal. What's important is that in the Pope's address this morning, that those clear themes for me emerged, that he talked about peace, he talked about building bridges, he talked about dialogue, and those qualities are deeply embedded in his person. They didn't just begin today. Certainly those of us who have known him for some time, he is that person who values human relationships, friendship, respecting the dignity of other people, and a sense of working for what is just and right in fairness to all.
So, Father, you have crossed paths with the new Pope before?
Yes, and many of us in the order have. From a personal point of view, I lived in the same community with him as a student in the 1980s, but then later on he was leader of our order internationally, and he always placed great importance on getting to know each of the members of the order and communities in the many countries where we're present.
So when you're hanging out with him, are you then chatting to your mates going, he seems like someone who could be the Pope?
I suppose it never entered my mind, but granted that it happened today, I'm just filled with gratitude because the qualities of the human being, they will be the same qualities that will characterise him in his role as Pope Leo. But he wasn't one of the most mentioned names, so we were taken by surprise today. But certainly we can see that it makes sense in terms of who he is.
What is it like when this type of announcement comes through, Father? Is it like a viewing party? Do you have your clergy and you're all sitting around watching for the smoke?
Well, what you've got to remember, this happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, Australian time. So I just happened to have the radio on that hour, and all of a sudden at 2:07 this morning, the white smoke. So obviously I kept the radio on, and then 3:14, this surprising announcement. Then I very quickly tried to wake up others in the house, and some of us watched him come out on the balcony at 3, shortly after that.
Father Peter Jones, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.